The cloud. Yeah, that's good. Hi, Mary. First of all, I would like to ask your background and your experiences with Hungarian companies. How do you know the Hungarian companies?
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for the invitation to participate in this great initiative. So my name is Mary Alcantara. I've been based in Budapest for the last 10 years. I'm American Hungarian, and I have a background. I've been working with startups for almost that entire time. I work with mainly through programs, through different incubators and accelerators, both in Hungary and in North America. I was working at Design Terminals Tech Lab. I also mentored for iCatapult and Traction Tribe in Hungary. And in the US, I know some of the people who run 500 startups and the Alchemist Accelerator. So I've seen a lot of startups from both sides of the pond. I'm currently running the FinTech Accelerator program for MKB Bank called MKB Fintechlab. We have an incubation program for early stage FinTech startups. And I'm working with Inputs, the Input program, advising on the strategy for exporting Hungarian startups to international markets. And through that, we've developed the Smart Landing program, which is a global network of ecosystems that we think could be warm, good landing locations for Hungarian companies. So I've been in this space for quite some time, and I love working with Hungarian startups.
That's fantastic. And obviously, you know a lot about the Hungarian and then the American business culture and mindset. So the next question is that what are the main differences between the Hungarian and American entrepreneurs? So what's the difference in their mindset or their behavior or their business strategy? So what can we know about that?
Yeah, it's a great question and one that comes up a lot. And I don't like to generalize because I think there's exceptions to this on both sides. But what I have seen is that Americans tend to be stronger on the sales and communications side. So we're really good at smoke and mirrors in the US. So we have a big story about a product that's maybe not so big or maybe not so exciting, but we can sell it and we can pitch it and we're passionate about it and excited about it. In Hungary, I think you tend to see the opposite. So the early stage prototypes tend to be much better than what I've seen in the US, but the founders can be very technical. They focus a little bit too much on the features and they can't necessarily communicate their excitement and their enthusiasm. So I think there's really a lot of amazing talent and amazing startups that come out of Hungary, but we need to work a little bit on how to communicate about that and how to show off our best side in the world. But fortunately, I think this is something that can be taught. And yeah, I think it's something that yeah, we can definitely improve on.
Okay, so what are the main questions a Hungarian startup must answer first when it's considering to enter the US market, because it's a completely different market?
Yes, absolutely. I think the US can be overwhelming just because of its size. So everybody thinks that it's a great market because there's so many people, but it's actually very segmented and fragmented. I think with any new market, what you always have to be asking yourself is, who is your target customer? Really, who are you building your solution for? And what is the pain that you're trying to solve for them? Because I think a lot of times we see solutions that are looking for problems. And I think it's really important to really focus on your customer, get to know them as much as you can. And also related to that, you make sure you're solving a problem for them that's a real pain, something that's not just a nice to have, but something that they're really going to spend money on to solve. And then the second piece of that is, how do you reach them? So I think having a laser focus on your customer and their pain points, and then figuring out how can you get access to more of those kinds of target customers? And that's what I think is the tricky part. So your customers, where do they hang out online? How do you actually find them, break into those? Facebook ads are not necessarily the best channel. Figuring out, maybe it's a Reddit platform or different kind of alternative channels and approaches, different types of events, things like that. So really figuring out those two pieces. So what's the pain you're really trying to solve, and how are you going to reach those customers? Those are the two most important things.
Okay, so these are the main questions. But when it comes to the problems and difficulties, so how do you see, what are the typical mistakes Hungarian companies are committing when they are considering to enter the US market?
Yeah, so I kind of alluded to some of these before in my previous answers, but I would say maybe two things that I see. So one of them is that I think a lot of times Hungarian and Central European startup founders can get too technical. So they're focusing more on the features and kind of overbuilding their products without really trying to find that product market fit in the first place. So really listen to your customer, and if you're not embarrassed by your product, you probably waited too long to ship it. I forget who said that, but I think it's really true. So you want to always be pushing out your product, getting feedback from the market as much as possible. And then the second thing I would say that I see is spending a lot on what I call dumb marketing. So going to the biggest tech shows, blowing all your budget to have an exhibition booth there before you're really ready, even just spending a lot of money on Facebook ads, that's not necessarily going to be the best channel. So I think figuring out really, you can be very tactical with your marketing spend to really find out what's going to be the best market for you before you pour money into that system.
And what about the communication? So Hungarians are mostly speaking Hungarian, but of course, many of them speaks very well English, but sometimes it can make a problem.
Yeah, I think that's sort of, a basic. So you need to be speaking the language wherever you're going. My experience, I think Hungarians are very good at learning English. Sometimes you see maybe there's a little bit of sloppiness in the written materials. So I think make sure you have your marketing materials and your website professionally lectured or written by a professional copywriter. I think that makes a big difference. But yeah, in terms of phone calls, I think having that kind of positive energy, passion, showing that, I think the communication, the language is not the barrier. I think it's more about the mindset.
Mm-hmm. And are the Hungarian entrepreneurs able to fit their speak and their pitch to the audience? I mean that sometimes I experience that Hungarian founders are telling the same stories independently from the audience. So how do you see that?
Yeah, I think it's really connected. I mean, as you develop as a speaker, you learn to be in tune with the audience and kind of look for those cues and tailor your message. I would say that's an issue. I think it's not just Hungarian, but I think it's hard for people to change and adapt. Most of the time we know what we're weak at, and it's hard to, put effort into improving. Yeah, one of my pet peeves is, I do pitch coaching, and, having somebody who's not coachable, who, you give them the feedback and they keep making the same kind of mistakes or keep presenting the same way, they use the same language. I think we need to be constantly evolving and really, like I said, laser focus on the customers. So try out different messages, figure out what works and incorporate that. You should always be evolving and kind of optimizing your pitch.
So obviously there are many risks when a small company, a Hungarian company, is considering the US market to conquer. So what would be your suggestions? What should be their first step when they are thinking about this very big and very large market?
Yeah, so I feel like I just keep repeating myself, but I think, talk to as many customers as you can. So in today's day, after COVID and everything, it's easier than ever, I think, to reach potential customers online, virtually, and do testing. Really just do A/B testing constantly. You should be talking to at least 5 different customers every week. It feels like a lot, but if you get into this habit of actually, always being close to your customer, always listen to them, what they're telling you, how are they responding to your pitch, to your marketing materials, to everything. So I would say the biggest thing I would do, don't just fly over and, put a guy in New York for 6 months. I've seen a lot of companies do this. It seems like a great idea, but it takes that long just to set up your basic sales pipeline. I'm talking more about, B2B here, but I think in general, do as much as you can before you even set foot in the States. You can really be doing a lot online. You can test everything and try to collect as much evidence from the marketplace, validate every part of your strategy before you invest in having an office or a full-time person or going to some of these big conferences like that.
And now you have about a decade-long experience with working with Hungarian startups. So have you seen improvement during these years regarding their preparedness and other things?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's definitely, just even the idea of having a startup has become much more accepted, I think, in Hungary over the past 10 years. When I was first getting started, people would say, okay, when are you going to get a real job? But now I think it's really, there's a startup culture that's developing in Hungary for sure. I think we still have, you know, a long way to go in terms of developing some on the communication side and the selling. But there's definitely improvements. I think more what I've seen is that there's starting to be this belief that it's possible. So I think, you know, talent is distributed evenly throughout the world. Resources are not. But I think in Hungary, if you have this mindset and you're trying to build a global company from day one, you can really get far. And I think just having that vision, that big picture vision, don't settle for anything, you know, less than what you're trying to do. And yeah, really focusing on the customer and, you know, having, you know, solving a pain that's going to actually become, you know, be profitable. So I think it's definitely evolved. I think we're hoping to see a lot more success coming out of Hungary in the next few years.
Okay. Do you see any differences between the Central European countries regarding their startup culture, or it's just Central European mindset?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I don't have a ton of experience. I have some experience with Poland and Ukraine. My perception is that there's sometimes a bit more of a scrappiness in some of the other countries. I think in Hungary, we've been privileged, but it's also a kind of a curse in disguise to have so much money in the ecosystem that it's pretty easy to fundraise at home and get your first round in the domestic market. But it can make startups a little bit complacent because there's not this pressure to go out and get the next round. You can kind of live from that for a long time because it's so affordable. But I've seen, my perception would be, in places where it's a bit tougher to get that funding, maybe some of the Balkan states, it's, there's a little bit more of this hunger. And I think it pushes you in a positive way to really, try to get revenue as soon as possible. And I feel like we're maybe getting a little bit lazy on that piece in Hungary. Okay.
Do you see some do you see some sectoral advantages for Hungarian startups? I mean, I believe that I see that the biotech companies may be very good, but I'm not so expert in that. So what's your experience?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think Hungarians just in general are very good at technology, very technical. We have a very, very strong research background. I would say research and manufacturing. These are the two areas where Hungary is really strong. I think what we need to work on is commercializing some of those research projects and, building out, a more professional and kind of developed tech transfer activity. And then on the manufacturing side, we have a lot of factories, and then, a lot of Western European countries end up making the money off of those by having the relationship with the customer. So what I would love to see in Hungary is being able to capitalize on that manufacturing capacity and develop some of those sales relationships and keep more of the value chain in the country. I think that would be the way forward. But I think, in terms of, any specific sector, there's some cybersecurity companies that are strong. I think fintech is developing for sure. We're still a small ecosystem, compared to a lot of the global markets. But I think in general, just kind of leveraging the strong technical ability and trying to match that with some commercialization, I think is going to be the path forward.
Is there anything else that you would like to suggest to Hungarian startups?
I think just it sounds maybe a little fluffy, but if you believe it, you can really do it. And I think that's the message I want to take away. You can really start a global company from anywhere. Why not Hungary? And if you spend the time to really read up on a topic, you can become an expert and you can compete with the best of the best in Silicon Valley or wherever in the world. They're still just people at the end of the day. And there's no reason why you cannot be among the best.
Mary, thank you so much for this fantastic interview.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tamás.